argument for God. See, we've been moving on. Anybody remember what arguments we've done so far? Anybody?
You mean like the cosmological type of word? Or?
Yeah, I had the first one was origin of the universe. What else? Right, design of the universe. We said the universe actually is governed by equations. This is insane, guys. You never have an unguided system designed by equations. Then we talked about the fine-tuning in the universe, the fact that everything's driven by unbelievable levels of precision. So far, so good?
Irreducible complexity.
Yeah, we haven't gotten there yet.
Oh,
Haven't
sorry.
talked about it. We're talking about today animal design. We're going to talk about physiology a little bit, okay? So we're looking still in just book 2. We're only in book 2, right? And in book 2, we're talking about science and how science actually points to the God of the Bible. So we're going to look at a few examples, actually, and go through them. And we're going to look at some scripture for this, too. So you guys can look and be amazed if you haven't before. I've actually used these in debates with non-believing groups because I've asked them to try to help me understand how they think this is possible. Okay, so we talked about the origin of the universe. We talked about design of the universe. We talked about fine-tuning that goes on in the universe. We're going to be talking about the others, irreducible complexity, information machines. Guys, there's so much here, so much, that all point, this is just science, never mind talking about how do you go from science to Jesus Christ, okay? So we're just looking at the high level, and today we're looking at animal kingdom. So the whole reason we do this is only one. How do you deconstruct or deal with arguments that are out there in the secular culture to get to the gospel? The foundation of the Christian worldview is the gospel. Most of us aren't quite sure how they've predetermined for themselves how they're going to present the gospel. Somebody says something crazy, we get into an argument, pretty soon we find ourselves arguing about what they said.
Mm-hmm.
And we never get there, right? And there's no value in that. The value is in how do you get to the gospel, right? So everything we teach in here is about how to do that. So we talked about in our first book, we talked about the 6 major elements, essentials of the gospel. Essentials. Not things that you can grow in or mature in your Christian faith, but things that if you don't have, you're not Christian. Okay, so in this one, we're still on the whole idea when we're looking at science, whether or not God exists. We're in a culture where the majority of people would say, as a matter of fact, last week's article I wrote on is really interesting. 72% of Americans still think religion is important to them. It's very frustrating for scientists and social philosophers because they're trying very hard to eliminate religion from America. But 3 out of 4 Americans would still say religion's important. It's just, but 78% of those same people would say it is losing its influence. And one of the big reasons is religion we think of as a transcending God, but that's not what religion is. Religion just has to do with what you worship. And we're seeing socialism and leftism, and we're seeing secularism as a religion. Okay, so when we look at all this, all the different things we're going through in this class for book 2, we've already talked about origins. So we've looked at all these pieces, all these evidences for a universe that came from nothing. We've already finished looking at all the evidences for a universe that operates incredibly precise. Now we're about to get into biochemistry and how life operates under the same rules as the universe, right? And the point we make when we talk about this is how we bridge the gap. We talk about, as I grow deeper in my understanding of who God is, I see all of this, and then what happens is I become more passionate to know him. See, Paul went, hey, you can't sleep in this class. I saw that. You can't sleep. We got to throw things at you if you sleep. We're just warning you. Or your dad said we can shave your head. Is that, no, we can't do that? Darn it. Okay. All right. So we have passion when you see all this stuff for this creator. Because remember, all these things say it can't operate by unguidedness. It can't operate according to natural explanations. So if it can't operate that way, how does it operate? You would hope somewhere in the Bible, God's telling you to pay attention to him. You would hope he's constantly telling you, pay attention, this is me, I'm the one doing it, watch, you'll see, right? And he does, but we're not teaching that. Because you know why? We can't, supposedly. Supposedly we can't talk about God because immediately, what's the argument? Why can't we talk about Christ openly in the culture? What happens when you do that? What has made Christianity so marginalized? What is the issue?
It's not politically correct.
Why? Why?
It's a culture.
Because of all the evil that Christians have done, that's a big push of people.
Okay, so they look back on the evil Christians has done. But what is it today that's happening that makes us marginalized? If you're in a culture that says, hey, a boy and a girl are the same, there's no difference. There's cisgender is the term on college campuses. There's no difference in gender. Or you say, all right, the Methodist Church. What just happened in the Methodist Church? What just happened? Anybody know? What happened?
About the wed, about allowing same-sex couples and Orthodox preachers, same-sex preachers.
Right.
But that's not new.
But what's wrong with it? Why not let it? We should care about loving one another.
They trying to change the doctrine.
Why? So what's the problem? Why not change it? Why is it not okay?
Because it's the problem. You can't change things just to make it comfortable for you.
It's interesting. So a little side note on what he just said. You realize we don't live in a democracy.
No.
No, we don't.
Everybody thinks we do.
We're not close.
Right. We live in a republic, not a democracy. Because if we lived in a democracy, I get a bunch of people together and say, hey, it says it's 60 miles an hour here on Highway 50 getting to church. I'm telling you, there's no reason we couldn't go 70. So you know what we need to do? Let's all gang up together because might makes right, and let's let the police officers know that we're going to be going 70 now because we don't see a problem.
Well, it kind of does work that way.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't.
I mean, on the highway.
It doesn't. What happens if you go over the speed limit?
Well, I went to St. Louis this week, and most of the people are driving 75, and if you're not,
Right.
You're
What
not run over.
happens? What happens if a police officer pulls you over for going over the speed limit?
Yeah.
Hopefully you get a warning.
Right. So why a warning? Why not just say, I pulled you over because I wanted you to know it seems that you have very good control at going over the limit, and I just want to congratulate you at how well you seem to be able to handle subjectivity on the speed limit. Is that what they say?
Just depends on the cop.
No. No, he never does that. He says, did you know the sign says 60 and you're going 70? What did he just tell you?
Broke the law.
There's a law. He just told you. How he decides to deal with it is his choice. But he just told you there is a law. That's what I mean by a republic. We are governed by laws in our Constitution. Look at the border situation. They're beating Trump up. They're beating up everybody. You know what they're doing? They're merely trying to enact the laws that exist. Today, there are laws that say illegal aliens must not come across. The argument is we need to love everyone. But there's a law. So the argument is it's okay to break the law. So my point is we're a republic. We're not a democracy. So when you look here, by knowing these things, what happens is you draw closer to the person who put the laws and rules in place. So when I ask you, why are we marginalized? Because our country doesn't believe in laws. They don't. Unless they go against something that they want, which is relativism and pluralism. People are good for laws that benefit them, but not laws that go against what they say. Christians follow laws. Why? Why do we believe, as a Christian, you should obey the law?
Bible says to.
We have a divine text. We have a divine text from a divine author who says that the greatest example you can give of trusting me is obeying me. That's what it says. It also does say that if they knowingly are breaking God's commandments, you have a right to not follow that law, right? I mean, that does exist. But in general, you follow the laws. They hate that. They hate that. They don't want. They want the equality bell, not the liberty bell. That's what they want. That's what our culture wants. Liberty allows evil. I don't know if you ever thought about that. You only have evil in a culture with freedom. Did Stalin, were people able to go around in communist Russia, or even today in communist China?
No.
People didn't have the freedom to do what they want and break rules
No.
because the government, under the guise of equality, made everyone subject to the rules of the government. Christianity doesn't do that. Christianity does something horrible to our culture. It says this, it says, remember what Jesus said? Jesus said, I am the way. No one comes to the Father except through the government.
Yeah.
Through me. This is our big spiritual battle. Is more and more our kids, more and more our generations are trained to believe they know what's best. We can chart our own future. We are able to set our own way. And God's saying, no, you're not. I created you. I know what's right. Okay. So, take a look at this. We're talking about animal kingdom. Premise number one, order, complexity, and precision in living organisms infer an intelligent design. So far, so good? Does that make sense? If you see very complex, orderly systems in biochemistry, in living organisms, the first thing you should think is, I doubt that that could happen randomly. There is order, complexity, and precision. Therefore, there has to be an intelligent designer. People okay with this so far? So, is there any wisdom literature out there that's instructing me I should study animals to learn about a creator? Watch this, guys. This is a riot. I love this verse.
Yeah.
Ask the beasts, and they'll teach you. And the birds of the air, and they'll tell you. Who among you does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In whose hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind? Literally, God is saying, if you want to know, again, more about the fact that I created everything, study animals. Is that not the coolest thing? He does this all the time. God's a little annoying, though, because he doesn't say, let me go through with you then how feathers came about, so you can see it couldn't have been by... He doesn't get into it. He just says, it's up to you now. You need to study and see it.
I can totally agree with that because I'm kind of into a lot of nature. You know, I'm watching animals and
Right.
salmon migrations.
Right.
And now seeing that verse, it's more so evidence that
Isn't it crazy?
I mean, to look at salmon come from Antarctica all the way up to Alaska, the same migrant.
Every time.
Every time, the wildebeest going from one part of Serengeti to the next. I mean, it's amazing.
Every time.
How you will see these animals year in and year out. It's just like clockwork. They don't speak, they just do.
Every time.
It's a beautiful thing. I'm gonna have to write that down.
Yeah, yeah, and you watch, we're gonna look at some of these, but one thing I threw out at somebody, I said, okay, you have, how many hearts, how many chambers are there in a human heart? How many chambers are there in a fish heart? How many chambers are there in amphibians? So, how, through evolution, did we go from 2
Yeah.
chambers to 4 chambers?
Right.
How's that happening, right? Evolution is all about bone structure. They say, oh, let me look at, the elbow of or the pedicles of a hand, and you know what, yeah, I came from a bat. It's like, wait a minute. Some of these things that are biochemical, how on earth did it add a chamber and then add another one?
Well, like when they're talking about, sorry, go ahead.
Well, they're saying that it goes from less complexity to more complexity, that it adapts.
Right.
So that's how they would argue from a fish to a
Right.
frog to a human.
Right.
because it's-
So what does that sound like to you? It sounds like a story.
Yep.
Yeah.
When you're in science, is that how you do science?
No.
No, you have to do science using experimentation, right? To be able to go from a premise or a supposition or whatever your hunch is to demonstrate it's true. So what happens, you use circular reasoning because going from simple to more complex is called adaptation. Going from complex to more simple is adaptation. So they'll use it whatever situation they're in.
Yeah.
No, they have faith that our hand came from a bat.
There you go.
So with the bone structures, there are common structures in life that
Sure.
are reasonable. They are necessary, like
Sure.
a square or a triangle.
Sure.
Triangles are strong. So when it comes to bats being similar in that, it's just that it is functionally the best.
I
mean,
my background,
by a designer.
my background for 15 years is system designer, right? It's
Mhm.
mechanical structural. So you will see in designs, you will see a lot of commonality,
Yeah.
right? We see it today with Chevy Corvette, right? If I take a 65 Corvette and I look at it year over year, I'm gonna see pretty similar engine design. You'll see a little advancement. Body designs aren't much different from aerodynamics, but nobody in their right mind would say that a 2018 Corvette evolved from a 65 Corvette. Nobody would ever think that way. They would think there's an engineer who took the best traits of a 65 and through technology added different traits to come up with this 2018. So you look at pedictal structure and I go, what are you talking about evolution? So what, God decided it's a really cool structure that works
Yeah.
across different organisms. What's the big deal? Then I come to this and I say, now explain this one. So let's take a look. Okay, we're going to be going over the next 3 or 4 weeks. I'm just highlighting 9 specific things. There's a lot more, but we're going to, just to give you a little flavor here. We talked about the 9 evidences for origins. We talked about the 8 evidences for design. We talked about a bunch of evidences for fine-tuning. Now let's take a look at animals. Bat echolocation, which you see in dolphins, you see in duck-billed platypus, you see in all these different types of animals. We've never designed a radar or sonar system that's even close to a bat's echolocation. Man cannot come close to replicating what a bat can do. Godwit, you were just talking about migrations. We're going to look at a 1-pound bird that flies an absolute crazy, like 14,000-mile circle every year, same time, all the time, never misses a beat. Giraffes, they have a valve system in their neck that keeps their head from exploding. We're gonna take a look at that one. It's a good one. Bombardier beetle, they've got a sphincter muscle that keeps enzymes separate from catalytic explosive chemicals until they get attacked, and at a split second, it mixes and goes out. And if they were off by almost a billionth of a second, they blow themselves up. The brain, you have 10 trillion nerve cells that are processing billions of signals every second exactly right all the time. The eye, your eye takes photons, turns photons into electricity so that it can then transfer it to an optic nerve so you can see. Your ear, this is even weirder. The ear takes sound waves that translate sound waves into mechanical waves that then go into electrical signals so that you can hear. Blood runs on autopilot. What happens if you take a canister of milk and you stick a knife in it? What does the milk do? Drains out. If I take a bucket of paint and I leave the lid off, what happens to the paint? Solidifies. How the heck do we have a system that when I puncture my veins, I don't bleed out like milk? Why doesn't that happen? Well, then how come when it clots, my whole body doesn't clot like the paint can?
Mhm.
Uniquely designed. to
How does
take
it
care
do?
of
How does it regulate that?
Mhm.
Right? It's insane. And then, how on earth do I have a blueprint? You know, you watch these commercials. These commercials sometimes get real irritating. What is it called? 23andMe? About the chromosome kit?
Please.
They are telling you you're designed. That's what they're telling you. They're telling you if you buy this kit, you'll understand why you're left-handed, or why your eyes are blue, or why your likelihood of getting breast cancer, or who your ancestors are. I mean, it's just like, that's a blueprint for a person. If evolution was true, you couldn't do that. All right. So remember what this is all about. This is the same slide we looked at last week, but I want to just reinforce this whole idea of systems being fine-tuned. You can have a lot of variability but hit the target on average, right? You can be very precise but not hitting the target. But when you have that, and you have that all the time, something's happening. That's impossible without being designed. For example, when we talk about the eye next week, well, I don't want to go there. Let's stick with this week. When we talk about the 7-valve system of a giraffe, if one of those valves wasn't synchronized with the others, so there's variability between them, because literally signals are being sent to each valve to attenuate the blood flow. If one of them was off any time, the giraffe's brain blows up when it bends down the drain. It only takes one. So how come it never happens? How come it never is off tilt with the other valves? I don't know one system I work on at work, and all the businesses I've worked in my career that operate all the time without somebody keeping them in control. It just can't happen in life. You guys would probably admit I've never had an instance in my life where I didn't pay any attention to my checking account and stayed precisely in control of my money. You better be looking at it once in a while. You know, my teenage daughter used to do that. You know, she bounced checks all over the place. If we don't control it, we get in trouble. So when we talk about precision, we're talking about minutely accurate, but fine-tuning means on a target. Minute accuracy is great, but it doesn't mean anything if it's not hitting its intended function. I'm saying this over and over again because to me, here's another, you can talk to people in the culture about this. When they're talking about things about, you know, we're all just evolved from animals, we're doing the best we can. Really? How do you explain eyesight in an eagle? How do you explain the human eye? It's not evolution, it doesn't work that way. Okay, bats. The paradox we have with bats. So, radar systems were really interesting. Back in World War I and II, one of the big problems we were having is there's two parts to a radar system. There's sending out a signal and receiving it back. And what it's all about is when a signal goes out, it's looking for a target, right? Because when you send a sound wave out, if it doesn't hit anything, it just keeps going. So what they wanted to do, especially when the Germans really, really got talented with their Luftwaffe, with the German Air Force, they were wiping us out at first. Matter of fact, one of my favorite movies, The Something Boys, where it was about Americans in the early World War who went over to France.
Yeah, Flyboys.
The Flyboys. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah.
Doesn't it break your heart that we went over there because we wanted to fight the Germans, and we were basically in little, just like crop duster type planes
Yep.
with these little guns, trying to figure out how to take out the German Air Force. But one of the things that we were struggling with is we couldn't design a radar system that would operate well so that we could figure out where they were at. And the problem we were having is the ability to receive a signal back without blowing the transmitter. See, when you send out the signal for a transmitter, the signal coming back is very powerful, but when you're receiving, you have to shut down the receiver when you transmit and then open the receiver to catch it. And it's split seconds. You have to control it very well. So a lot of times, when they'd send a signal out, they'd blow the receiver, just like you do with speakers in a car.
Like feedback.
Right. So they were having problems. So what happened was, they're studying the bat. The bat has an incredible system called echolocation, where it doesn't just locate its prey or objects based on a signal when it hits and it receives it. It can actually tell the texture of the object and the size. So it can tell the difference between a feather and a marble. It can tell the difference between a wall and a tree branch. I mean, it's unbelievable how precise this system is.
And it's all sonar, you can't hear it.
Yeah, so you know what they found the bat had? Has this little flap of skin. It beats at less than almost like a billionth of a second, so that it closes when it's transmitting and opens when it's receiving. And it's precise, so it never blows its eardrum. So we designed our radar based on the bat's physiology to have a shutter system so that we wouldn't blow out our radar by studying an animal. Because by evolution, over billions of years of accumulated changes, we ended up with a bat that could do that. Here's what's interesting. So when you look at what they call efficiency index, what they're doing is they're taking different factors, and there's an equation they use to calculate just how efficient a system is. And what they find is the bat's system is billions of times, these are negative numbers, because the efficiency index is so much stronger than any radar we've ever designed. The bat's ability to locate and hone in on its target is billions of times more accurate than anything we've ever built. How's that possible? What's the best explanation for the bat's precise, repeatable radar system that surpasses the world's best engineers? How anyone can teach this as being a better explanation than small incremental changes over billions of years by evolution, this is an example of idiocy to think that that's the way it could work, because all you would need is one or two things to go wrong and the bat's dead. It couldn't happen. So you couldn't have progeny that had a little better ear flap than the guy before him and they survived. No, the bat's dead. Bat can't live. Bat can't survive. It has to all be there at the same time. Okay, here's yours on migration, the gauntlet. Now, just take a look at this chart. This is what they do every year. So from March 17th to March 25th, they go 6,300 miles from New Zealand to Japan. They do it in 9 days. This is just the first leg. Then they go 4,500 miles from May 1st to the 6th in 6 days. Then they go 7,200 miles from August 30th to September 7th in 8 days. Same pattern every time, every year. And you see the picture of the goblin in the upper right corner. They just weigh about a pound. They're just little birds.
What do they eat?
All right, so they do this exact pattern, at the same time every year, and they don't eat, they don't rest, they don't drink during the leg.
Wow.
It's only when they get to the destination they refuel.
Non-stop.
This is insane. How do they know to do this every year?
Doesn't matter if it's rain or snow, they just.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. So why do Gotwits never mess up their migration? Because there's a creator who's programmed them that way. This is how they operate. Maybe he should have done that with us instead of free will.
Yeah.
Instead of free will, you know, if he had programmed us to behave and act a certain way, there wouldn't be any breaking of the law.
There would be no laws.
What would that be called? Communism. Guys, what Stalin did, what Marx did, is they said, have government control. Anybody who's a naysayer, get rid of them, and then make government the ruling dictatorship. Anybody ever see the movie Killing Fields? It'll break your heart. Literally, when the Khmer Rouge took over in North Vietnam, first thing they did is they got everybody together and they asked a simple question in villages. Who's a teacher? Who's a leader? Who's in government? And they killed them all. Then they went to the children and asked them, what does your mom or dad do? And the children would tell on their parents, and they killed them. Because they wanted a communist system where government would dictate how people behave. See, animals act by instinct. We act by conscience. We have instincts, but we have a much higher level of responsibility. So, design. It's a lot more plausible than accumulating billions of changes. So far, so good? Okay. My favorite one, giraffes. Okay, we're going to, this one I love to use when I talk to skeptics because I'm so overwhelmed by what this looks like. So if you look at a giraffe versus a person, right? Now, a giraffe has a heart that weighs 25 pounds. I just want you to think about this for a minute. A giraffe's heart, you have to hold it like this, all right? And the distance from the heart to the head for a giraffe is almost 7 feet. Now, what is a heart? What does the heart do? You realize it's the biggest muscle in your body. The heart is nothing more than a pump. It's just a muscle, right? Your lungs aren't a muscle. Your lungs have a function, right? Your liver, your kidneys, they all perform functions. The heart is nothing more than a pump. That's all it's doing. A giraffe's is humongous. A human's, us, is about 1.5 pounds. It's 6 inches away from your brain, and 12 inches away from your brain. It's not even a quarter the size. Okay? So the first question is, when they explain how a giraffe got a long neck, what do they teach you in school? How did a giraffe get a long neck?
Adaptation.
So it could reach.
So, to get to the leaves?
Yes! Yes! Okay. Wow. We're not going to shave your head. All right. What they do is they tie it to natural selection and survival of the fittest. You see, what's going on is animals are competing to survive. Some adapted to reach up where there was a food source so that their progeny could survive. So just stop and think about this for a minute. So all animals had about the same neck size. And at some point, an animal went, oh, and they're doing this, okay? Now, by doing this, as billions of years went by,
Stretch this neck.
it starts growing. You follow me? Until at some point, someday, you can get the leaves.
Some point, someday.
I'm telling you, it's in your textbooks. You laugh. We should be going nuts as Christians to think our kids are taught such lunacy. But that's how it works. But you know what they base evolution on completely? Morphology, anatomy, bones. So they look at bones. Well, here's the problem. First one you'd have to say is, okay, if its neck evolved to reach the leaves, how did its heart know to evolve with its neck? How did they talk to each other and go, hey, I'm a pump, and gosh, as the neck's growing, I better grow with it because, I got to get blood up there. How did it know? The second one, it's even worse. How do you explain the way blood circulates in a giraffe? I'm going to show you that one, okay? So the whole idea, you'll hear this, I had on my website is a debate we had on evolution with a humanist group and an evolutionist. It was me and Kevin Hubbard against these guys. And it was in this room, I think. It was packed. We had like 150, 200 people. And I went through this one. And I didn't hear a peep because nobody can answer this stuff. All right, here's the problem. It's called the Retta Mirabile Keraticum. Fancy term, right? All right. Giraffe reaches up with its neck. 6 feet 8 inches away is this pump. Gotta get blood to the brain. You guys ever been down and then come up quickly? What happens?
Lightheaded.
You get lightheaded. So the pump, the reason it's 25 pounds is because that's a long distance. So it's a huge force. It's pushing that blood up so that the giraffe gets enough blood so it doesn't pass out. But then it's got to drink. Right, here's where everything happens. It's incredible. If it didn't have this valve system, it's still a 25-pound heart. It's gravity now. See, when it's going up, the pump is fighting gravity. When it's going down, it's with gravity. What should happen?
It should fall.
Yeah? Yeah? You know what happens though? You blow its brains out because the blood is rushing now downstream with a huge heart that's pushing the blood against your brain. Your brain blows up. Okay?
So don't look down.
Yeah, so a giraffe should never drink.
Yeah.
But if giraffe has this valve system, there's 9 of them. What's happening, it's precise. So as it goes down to drink, the first valve starts necking down the flow of blood, the second one a little tighter, until when it gets to the brain, the flow of blood is exactly the same as if it were standing up. If any of these is off, the pressure's too great and it damages its brain. If they didn't all operate together, it blows up. Where does that come from?
Years and years of evolution.
Where does the system come from? You have a complex, precise, pressure-regulated valve system that keeps a constant pressure in a 7-foot-long neck, whether it's looking up or laying down, so it's exactly the same all the time.
Wow.
So in this meeting you had, and you went through this, what was their response?
0, no comments.
They didn't say
Watch it on YouTube. No, nothing.
Nobody was there, huh?
Right, right. So let's watch a little short video from a scientist on this.
A bull giraffe is about 18 feet tall. In order to get blood up that long skinny neck against gravity, the bull giraffe has to have a powerful pump, and that's his heart. And the heart of a bull giraffe can be as much as 2.5 feet long. Big, powerful pump. Now, as he's going along here, living his life, everything's just fine, but all of a sudden, this 18-foot tall creature decides, I need a drink of water. So he bends his head down to get a drink of water. Now we have a problem. Because now this powerful pump, instead of pumping against gravity, is pumping with gravity. And so the heart gives a mighty squeeze, and the blood shoots down his neck, hits his brain, and bursts his brain. And so now he just blew his brains out. Okay, so he's dying, and he must be thinking to himself, I need to evolve something here to take care of my problem. When I get a drink of water, I blow my brains out. Of course, we know dead creatures don't evolve. But he doesn't blow his brains out, because as he bends his head down, there are like little spigots in his artery that goes up the neck, little valves, and they close. But the last pump is beyond the last valve. And so it's enough to burst the little arterioles in his brain, but it doesn't go into his brain. The last pump kind of goes whoop underneath the brain into like a sponge. And this sponge just gently expands, and he hasn't blown his brains out. He gets his drink of water, and now he sees a zebra kind of running up from this side, and he just ignores it. But he sees a lion coming up from this side. Oh, the lion wants to eat me. I got to get out of here. Now, how does he know the difference, by the way? Evolutionists can't explain that to us. But the fact is, here comes this lion. He's going to eat the giraffe. And so the giraffe jumps up. He runs about 5 steps, passes out. Not enough oxygen to his brain. While he's there, passed out, the lion is eating him. He must be thinking, I need to evolve something here. I got this problem. I pass out when I get up too fast. But he doesn't, of course. Well, why? Well, because God made him so that when he begins to bring his head up, the little spigots, the little valves in the artery open, the sponge under the brain gently squeezes that last little pump of oxygenated blood up into his brain. There are little valves in the vein that goes down the neck. They close. And by the time he's up and running, everything is fine. His blood pressure is fine, and he does just fine. Well, how would that evolve? He needs all of those parts, all there, all at the same time, all at once, or he's dead. And so I think the giraffe is another example of a designer. He needed a designer to design him just like he is.
The tallest giraffe known was named George.
Does that make sense? Do you guys get this, what we're talking about here? Does this make sense to you? Okay? Do they teach this in school? They no.
They taught us that like over time they kept stretching.
Yeah. Yeah. What makes more sense to you?
The first one.
The stretching?
It does.
Distantly?
No, but that's okay. The stretching makes sense, right? So how did the heart follow with the neck so that the blood wouldn't kill it? It wouldn't blow its head up. How did that happen?
Right, go ask that.
Right. It's okay. They've made evolutionary theory to sound right. They made it to sound like it makes sense, right? But when we discover biochemistry, when we start understanding how systems work, it doesn't make sense anymore. It doesn't make sense. And if you ask them, well, why didn't more animals get longer necks? How come just a giraffe? How come we don't see this? How come we still don't see this going on anymore? How would they answer that, you think? Yeah, they can't. So if you think about this for a minute, they're telling you a story they can't back up with any evidence. The valve system isn't a story. You can test it. You can test it, and they have tested it thousands of times. The valves always work the same way. If they're always operating the same way, what does that mean about the valve system? It can't evolve. By definition, what is evolution?
Change over time.
Change over time, simple to complex. So all of a sudden, we've got a valve system in the very first giraffe we ever found to the valve system today, and it's exactly the same. It's never changed. So it's not evolving. So it's been the same way, and it works perfectly. What does that mean? Naturalism and evolution can't explain it. So what's the alternative? It has to be designed. So it doesn't mean it's Jesus Christ, but it means it has to be designed. What is so bad about that? Why can't we talk about that in schools? Just talk about it. You know what we're doing to you guys? We're not allowing you to think. We're telling you how to think. Would you like it if all we did is told you how to think and instead let you think for yourself? Right, that stinks. Our job as educators should be to allow you to use the evidence to think for yourself. Okay? All right. Why don't they blow their brains out? What is the best explanation? The best explanation is it has to be designed. It can't be small changes, because if it were, there wouldn't be any giraffes. All right, this one's cool. Another cool one. Here's the beetle. So we got this beetle. It's kind of weird. This beetle has this muscle right here that separates two chambers. You've got a chamber here and a chamber here inside of it. And in this one, you have enzymes. Now, the purpose of enzymes are to what they call cataclysmic. It forces reactions. These guys, when they're messing with other chemicals, they cause a reaction. Usually an explosion is what they do. So this is sealed off, and over here you got some really ugly, nasty stuff. You got hydroquinones and hydrogen peroxide. Anybody ever spill hydrogen peroxide on themselves? It hurts like crazy. So you've got this hydrogen peroxide with hydroquinones in the other chamber, so they're kept separate until something attacks it. Okay? What's happening is there's an inhibitor chemical naturally in here that's preventing an explosive reaction. So it's kept in this part of the body, and that inhibitor keeps these two from reacting and blowing up the beetle. So obviously, where did this come from? You know, this is weird. Then you've got here catalase and peroxidase that are down here, and these guys are just dying to get in here, because it will get rid of the inhibitor and cause a reaction. Now, first of all, in your head, you got to think, how did this ever get set up this way? How did this creature come up with this design, or this? Did it just evolve this way? It couldn't evolve this way because you can't get an inhibitor showing up at the same time as those two without successive changes over time. There's something weird going on. So, by keeping those two enzymes, catalase and peroxidase, separated from the two chemicals, you're able to keep it from blowing itself up. But the minute it opens that sphincter muscle, boom, it blows itself up. Or does it? Okay. So what's happening here is I'll show you the picture and we'll go back. I showed it to you a minute ago. It has somehow been able to time an opening of its butt with an opening of its sphincter muscle within a billionth of a second. So when the two combine, it shoots it out and hits it, and anybody trying to eat it. If that wasn't aligned with that at the same time, it blows itself up. And it never blows itself up. How the heck did this beetle figure out how to do this?
She said I was named.
Right. And it's an explosion. It is literally like a grenade.
Well, Wikipedia explains it.
Here, wait, well, let me show that I know. You're going to hear, there's all...
Genetic engineering by advanced extraterrestrials.
Right, okay. You're gonna hear, again, storytelling. What happened is, as we get smarter on biochemistry and we understand systems, more and more we're uncovering design. Let's watch this video.
Exploration Films. Check us out on the web at explorationfilms.com.
So in the fall of 1971, I went to Baylor in Dallas and gave my first lecture. It was on the evolution of the tooth. And I talked about how these fish scales gradually migrated into the mouth and became teeth. And a couple of my students came to me after class that day and said, Dr. Martin, have you ever investigated the claims of creation science? Well, that was 1971. I'd never even heard of it. And so I'm thinking to myself, where are these guys coming from? I've never heard of this. And so I said, sure, I'll look into this with you. And I'm thinking kind of as a cocky young professor, I'll blow these guys away. Well, they asked me to start studying the assumptions that the evolutionists make. And in all my years, 8 years of scientific education, I have never had a single professor tell me about an assumption. And so we started looking at the assumptions, and I began to realize they're making some claims here that really the assumptions aren't valid. And then they asked me to start studying some animals and see if I thought that animal could evolve. Well, the first thing that we really studied together was this little bug called a bombardier beetle. And this little insect, it's about a ½ inch long, and it mixes chemicals that explode. So I began to think, okay, now how would that evolve? Let's say if evolution is true, and you're evolving along here, and you don't have a defense mechanism, because that is the defense mechanism of the bug. So if evolution is true, it had to somehow evolve that. So let's say it's coming along here. Well, the first time it evolves the explosion, what does it do to the bug? Boom, you just splattered your bug, okay? So splattered bug pieces don't evolve. So how could this have happened? Well, it doesn't blow itself up. It has another little factory inside itself that manufactures chemicals. A chemical acts as a catalyst so that when you squirt that chemical in with these other chemicals that are like in neutral, you get your explosion. Well, the first time it manufactured that little chemical, here it goes again, blew itself up again. But it doesn't. Why? Well, because it has like an asbestos-lined firing chamber. And even then it would blow itself up if it didn't have somewhere for the explosion to go. So it has twin tail tubes. And it can aim these tail tubes all the way up, out the side, out the front. Let's say a spider is coming up toward its side, and it doesn't have time to turn around and shoot. It can just take its little gun turret, aim it out there, and shoot. The explosion on this little bug, all you hear, if you're listening as a human, you hear this pop. But scientists have now put that explosion in slow motion. And it's like about 1,000 sequential little explosions, but they're so fast, all we hear is one pop. And so you think, well, why would that be? Well, that was a curious thing for the scientists that study this little bug. A lot of them at Cornell University, some other places. And what they discovered was that if it was just one big pop, the little bug, if he's shooting like a spider, let's say over here, and he goes, oh, bang, and shoots it, he's going to pop himself right out of there. It's like lighting a burner on a jet engine. So he's out of there. But as long as it is a sequential explosion with his little legs, he can hang on. How would evolution explain a sequential explosion? This little bug messes with all the theories of evolution. There is no way a slow, gradual process is going to produce this bug. There's no way even the newest theories of evolution, like punctuated equilibrium, which means evolution happens very fast. Well, there's no way that will explain this little bug. I began to realize, how could this particular little animal, for instance, evolve? It needed all of its parts. It needed everything there all at once, or you just don't have the animal. And my stomach started to churn, if I really want to be honest. My wife would tell you, my stomach churned for 5 years. It took a 5-year struggle for me to begin to flip the way I think, from thinking in an evolutionary way to thinking in more this animal or little creature, little bug, whatever, was created fully formed, just like it is. Because that went against everything I'd ever learned.
Exploration films.
Isn't that
where
cool?
Curious truths.
Guys, I
and
gotta tell you,
uncommon minds.
when you put all this together, you know what you find? You find Jesus Christ. You find Jesus Christ. In the Bible, he says he created everything. He made it the way it is. It is what it is. And you have to decide whether or not you want to make him proud. You want to stand up for him and not let people get away with this nonsense. Does this make sense? We worry about what people are going to think. I worry about people growing up believing this crap, this nonsense. It's just crazy. Okay, so next week, what we're going to do is we're going to get into irreducible complexity. Now we're going to look at how you see, why your eyes do what they do, and we're going to look at how blood forms, how you're able to not drain out like milk or solidify like paint, okay? Anybody got any thoughts or anything to end this? Anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, they said it was ancient scientists that came up with the extraterrestrial theory, but they never talked about what the modern scientists thought of how it happens.
Well, what did?
How the
Wikipedia?
bombardier beetle came to be.
Oh, yeah. You're not going to get a lot of stuff that's going to talk about how how people view that. Matter of fact, let's take a second. I got a few minutes with you guys. Let's just take a second. I'll show you this one. Because right now they're funding this again. They're starting to fund this again, but not the government, private sectors. To go out and look for signals in the universe for aliens, in outer space life. So SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, is in Mountain View, California. And out there, they started out in 1960 with a Cornell University astronomer. And today they use the Allen Radio Telescope, about 130 scientists. They spend about $2.5 million on an operating budget just to keep this going, to try to find signals in space. And what are they looking for? What's their definition of intelligence?
Another life form.
All they want is a non-natural radio signal. That's all they want. So like the movie Contact with Jodie Foster, some of these, all they want is a signal that says, aha, sounds like Morse code, right? Sounds like something different. But the problem is, that's not information anyways. So you hear a non-normal signal, big deal. By the way, they've never heard one. But what we really want is information, like a Morse code or something. So they've been looking now, I gotta update this, I have it tonight to 2015. Have they ever found any non-normal signal in all the time they've been doing this? Right? There's never been anything from outer space that they've ever found that points to intelligence. So is there any wisdom literature out there that would tell me the source for intelligence is actually probably a transcendent being that you should be looking for? Matter of fact, if I wanted to find intelligence, where should I look? I should take that radar and do what? Just turn it around on my brain, because what if we discovered in cells that clearly show intelligence, information? What if we found that points to information? DNA. DNA. So there's nothing in the universe, but it's all over the place inside of us. Isn't that insane? If you have somebody, they're opening up cold cases now that are 40 years old if they have some source of blood or some source of organic material that they can do DNA testing on, and they can catch a criminal that committed a crime 30 years ago. Why? Because there's specific information that only that person has. It's not found in anyone else. God says it all the time. Okay, so what we'll do next week is, again, if you want to read ahead, we're going to be in irreducible complexity, looking at the human eye, how it operates. We're going to look at how blood functions, and we'll talk about that. So let's Kevin, would you close us in prayer? Do you mind?